Good evening, everyone. Welcome to The 48th with Kurt Davis. I'm Frank Camacho, and we'd like to introduce you to a different kind of political talk show. One, Kurt is a Republican. I am not. We disagree, but we do sit and talk, and we're able to discuss issues. And I think Alexis Tamaron, last week's guest, put it best, that a lot of voters get turned off by all the squabbling going on in politics.
Disagreeing and honorably disagreeing is
right.
something that can be done.
And disagreeing...
It's rare in our political culture, but it can be done.
It can be done. And disagreeing is what Doug Ducey and Diane Douglas are still doing after a couple of weeks now. How long is this thing going to go on, this melodrama?
Until Diane Douglas figures out that legislators have pea shooters, statewide elected officers have pellet guns, and governors have howitzers. When she figures that out and stops the nonsense, she's not going to win this battle with a governor.
Even though she may legally be right.
Yeah, you get to the point where the argument about the legality becomes a side issue to the personality battle, and I am blown away that she hasn't figured out she's not going to win that battle with a governor.
Well, I think, you know, on a PR front, I mean, after she strikes a rather conciliatory tone
for
at
about
a
25 minutes.
Right, and then she goes to the State Board of Education meeting, yanks all the microphones off that, and then she votes against letting the two people go back to work. I mean, she really does look like she's a bit of a spoiled brat.
Interestingly, I think it's a sideshow that actually helps the governor. He appeared gubernatorial, he made a gubernatorial decision, and he stuck with it.
What about, does this bring back memories of Evan Meacham?
It can. Recalcitrance can, does bring back memories. But also this week, Frank, we saw the president propose 10,000 new IRS agents.
Just trying to get the tax refunds out quicker.
Yeah, they're going to cost more. The new ones they're going to find are going to cost more than the 10,000 employees. It's a radical expansion of the IRS. I don't get this president, but I guess I just live in a different place. IRS,
what is it about this you don't get?
We already over-enforce the IRS codes. We already harass business and individuals, and apparently they've also gotten in the business of harassing 501c3s and 4s. I mean, so now they're going to have 10,000 more people to harass the American people with a document that's this thick, and nobody even understands half the things they have to do related to filing their income tax returns. Locally,
there was an issue that has come up because of a judicial ruling in Alabama, which may affect thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of people here in the United States. Has to do with the executive order that the president put out on immigration.
A victory for the Constitution. It was a great week.
Yeah, sometimes though there are laws in this country that are unjust, and sometimes you have to spur people to action. And personally, I just don't have a problem with the president doing what he did.
My problem with it is, again, we've talked about it before, the president doesn't have authority to make law. I mean, our Constitution is very clear that that is left to the Congress.
Understood.
He made law, and he violated that premise. Now, the argument about what should or shouldn't be done, and are there laws that are unjust, or not having certain laws create injustice, you and I could have that conversation. I believe we need holistic reform of our immigration laws, including the safety of the border. But I don't believe a president, whether they're Republican or Democrat, has the right to make law from the White House.
I just think that when you have a system that are tearing families apart, are separating families, or at least have the potential of separating families, something has to be done. And if this would spur the Congress into action,
and I know you don't think that will happen. I still am optimistic it will happen before the 2016 election cycle.
I disagree only because I've seen no inclination on primarily the Republican side to even discuss immigration, because it's just frankly too good of an issue for them politically.
I don't think it's not a good issue in a presidential election.
I hope you're right. This is one time where I really do hope you're right.
And I think it's one of the keystone issues that the public will see whether the Congress is actually getting their job done.
And speaking of Congress, we will talk to a representative who is really getting the job done in Washington, and she has That's Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema. She'll be our guest when the 48th continues.
The 48th is presented in part by Eastmark, the mark of something special, currently offering over 30 beautiful new quick move-in homes.
Welcome back to the 48th, and our guest this evening is Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten, thank you very much for being with us.
Well, it's great to be with you two today.
It's been an interesting time in Washington. Specifically, let's talk about one main issue right off the bat, and it has to do with veterans. Is the situation better now for veterans than it was, let's say, this time last year?
You know, that's a difficult question to answer. I would say for some veterans, the situation's better. But for many veterans, they're still struggling.
Why isn't it? Why isn't it better for all veterans?
That's a question I ask every single day. You know, we passed a big bill last year in a bipartisan way, but that bill needs to be implemented. And individual VAs are implementing at different rates, and it's very difficult to get continuity. We just passed another bill about a week and a half ago, the Clay Hunt SAVE Act. I was actually really privileged to be there when the president signed this bill into law. That'll help prevent veteran suicide. But we all know, laws don't matter if you can't get them implemented. So I've been pushing Secretary McDonald and our interim director here in Phoenix, Director Grippen, to implement those legislative changes right now. But I gotta tell you guys, regardless of whether or not legislation changes, we've got to do more to fix things at home. So last spring, after the controversy broke and I learned about these horrible issues happening to veterans, we started a mental health group that my office convened with the VA, veteran service organizations, and over 22 nonprofit partners to come together and start working together to solve veterans' problems. You know, a lot of veterans don't know that you can get resources outside the VA. And we started connecting folks with those resources while we're waiting and pushing the VA to do better. So I'm going to give you an example from earlier this week. On Tuesday, Congressman Matt Salmon and I hosted a joint Veterans Resource Clinic. It's the third one I've hosted since last July. And at that clinic, a constituent showed up and he's homeless. This is a veteran who hurt his back jumping out of planes. He was a parachuter, and he is still waiting for his disability claim to be processed. So he lost his home and he's been living in his car. So he comes to us on Tuesday morning and says, I've been living in my car. That's unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. Well, the good news is, because we've got this coordination between the VA and these service groups in the community, we got him into housing on Tuesday night. We're going to get him into long-term housing.
I have a follow-up to that, and I do respect the work that you've been doing on veterans issues. From a conservative viewpoint, I look at this and say, I don't think that the government's going to get this right. They've gotten it wrong for too long.
Right.
Do you ever have conversations about giving veterans simply the ability to purchase services on their own?
Absolutely. And that's part of the law that we passed last year. And Phoenix is actually the biggest pilot for that. In our law that we passed last summer, we said that veterans can get choice. So if they're not getting access to services they need, they can actually go get their services in the private community, and the VA will cover the cost of the bill. We piloted that program here in Phoenix, and we're expanding it. So David McIntyre, who you probably know him, he used to work for Senator McCain. He runs Tri-West, and we've greatly expanded their services. This is a private nonprofit corporation who works with the VA. So when the VA can't, for instance, see all the vets who need to see a urologist, or all the vets who need to see a heart specialist or a surgeon, Tri-West connects those veterans with private resources in the community, and they deal with the billing on the backside so the veteran doesn't have to spend all of his or her time in that frustrating, horrible process. We expanded Tri-West contract. Well, frankly, David and I went to the mat last summer, and we pushed and pushed and pushed. Before the new secretary even came on board, we pushed with the old secretary and said, we want expansion of this contract in Arizona, not just for physical services, not just for specialty services, but for primary care and mental health. And we're continuing to expand that around the country.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Following up on that, you've done a lot of work on this issue. When the president was here and he drove right by the VA, were you bothered by the fact that he drove right by that facility and maybe could have stopped and placed more emphasis on getting this problem done,
You know, I
fixed
was
and done?
incredibly disappointed. I wasn't in Arizona that day. We had votes in Washington,
Right.
so I was serving the community there. But I actually said, not just to KTAR, but to all of the other news sources that I spoke with that day, that That's a no-brainer. You go see the veterans, meet with the new director. You know, interim director Grippen came out of retirement to help shape up the Phoenix VA, and while it hasn't been perfect under his tenure, what he has demonstrated is humility, which I appreciate, and a willingness to get things done. So just last week, when the news came out about veterans not getting the care they need for suicide prevention, Director Grippen didn't say a bunch of, oh, we've done this, or oh, we've done that. You know what he said? I want a specialist team to come in, assess it, and help us build a plan to fix it. That's the right kind of response we need.
Getting back to the president, did you talk to the White House? Did you convey your displeasure?
You
And
know,
did you get any response from
Frank, the White House doesn't really call us very often.
No, I didn't think so.
So we certainly sent word up the channels that we were disappointed, but frankly, they're not super well connected with what's happening on the ground.
That being the case, would you say that they have they been a help or a hindrance in trying to fix this mess?
You know, I would say that the new secretary, Bob McDonald, appears to be a person who's got his head screwed on straight. You know, when he came in, he started, you know, just right hitting the ground running. His first visit was right here at the Phoenix VA late last summer. He's got a 90-day plan that he's implementing, and then each 90 days he updates it. And he's willing to hold himself and his staff accountable. You know, Secretary McDonald helped us push to get rid of Director Hellman, who was falsifying numbers, taking money in bonuses, and as we later learned, taking trips to Disneyland while veterans were waiting for care. And, you know, I pushed him very hard, as I know other members of our delegation did. And Secretary McDonald, the day he called me to say we fired her, I was so happy, because that means we're going to move forward in getting long-term leadership here in Phoenix to take care of those veterans.
And if for a permanent solution, is the VA part of the plan for a permanent solution, or is it going to be in spite of the VA?
Well, I think the VA needs to be a part of a permanent solution. You know, when you talk to veterans, most veterans want to get their care from the VA, but they want and they deserve a VA that works for them. So we're interested in helping the VA be transparent and accountable, but also ensuring that the VA is a center of excellence in treating the diseases and disorders that our veterans face. You know, most doctors in the mainstream community aren't experts on post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury. And we need high-quality physicians and medical support professionals, social workers and psychologists, et cetera, at the VA to give that care. But if they're not doing it well, people are going to go elsewhere, and they should.
Okay.
So we've got to do both.
Okay.
Increase the priority at the VA and have good care in the community.
Lots more to talk about with Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema when the 48th returns. Stay with us.
Welcome back, and we're fortunate today to have Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema with us talking about the issues of the day in Congress. And we've been talking about veterans, and I know you have a very specific effort you've been engaged in, and I think we need to talk about that.
So one of the things I'm really excited about is this Veterans Resource Guide. We developed a 27-page guide for veterans in the Maricopa County area to get access to all the resources they need. So some veterans need help from the VA, but other veterans might need a service dog, or they might need access to educational services, maybe they need mental health help. Soup to nuts, it's all in here, and this guide is free. So folks can get it from our office. They can even download it from our website at any time. And every couple months we update it and put out a new issue. And we want veterans and their loved ones to know they've got resources throughout our community, and we're here to help them.
So let's talk a minute about getting things done, which is an oxymoron in Washington, D.C.
It is my slogan, however.
Yes.
Get stuff done.
I want to ask you about that. I mean, you're in the minority.
That's right.
I know as an outside observer, you've been very aggressive in working across the aisle. I've seen it myself up close. What are the issues that you think you can really shape and drive through the majority?
Well, that's a really good question, because we're seeing a Congress that has been more stymied and divisive than in many years. But as you guys both know, I used to serve in the State House and the State Senate, and I was in the minority during my time there. And yet, by being someone who's approachable and willing to work across the aisle, you can get stuff done. So my opinion is that while many people are bickering and fighting in Washington, and that's kind of their trade of the day, I'm going to ignore all of that. I'm just going to find ways to work with other people to get stuff done. So obviously on veterans issues, we found great success. The legislation we passed last year, the Clay Hunt Save Act this year, but we have much more to do. And I've been partnering with folks, not just here in Arizona, like Congressman Matt Salmon, but all over the country on a variety of issues. So we're working together on issues around financial reform, making sure that folks can get ahead and that the regulatory scheme is not overly burdensome for businesses here in Arizona that want to grow. And we're working on issues like growing jobs and building a new economy, being innovative about how to create new infrastructure projects in our country to put Americans back to work and keep our country safe without increasing taxes or burdening our federal government.
Who's your favorite Republican counterpart?
Oh gosh, Kurt, that's not fair. I have a really long list. You know, I would say here at home, I work with Matt most frequently. Matt represents the district immediately to the east of mine, and we work together on export-import issues. We work together on business growth. We did a Veterans Resource Fair together earlier this week, and we've also done a couple panels, actually just this week together, on transit, on business growth. So he and I, not only do we work well together, we just like each other, like we're friends. He's a great person to work with. At the federal level, I would say, gosh, I mean, I get along with everyone, Kurt, as you know. And there are some folks who are just really easy to work with. Chairman Jeff Miller from Florida is the chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and he has been incredibly generous and kind in including me in allowing the ideas that I'm bringing forth for veterans to move forward. Dan Benishik of Michigan, his daughter's in active duty. My little brother is on active duty in the Navy right now. And so we're working together on mental health issues, on veterans issues. So the list is long.
Okay. What about, you mentioned some of the issues coming to mind. What about one that's very important to Arizona, especially in light of a recent judicial decision out of Alabama, immigration reform? Do you think anything will come out of this Congress?
You know, I try really hard not to predict things when I don't know the answer, because that's how you end up looking dumb later, right? But I can say that I think that the prosecutor reform is more difficult now.
Even with the presidential election 2 years from now?
I think it's a difficult challenge in Congress. You know, there was a bill that was proposed in the House just a few weeks ago by Chairman McCall, who represents Texas. He's the chair of the Homeland Security Committee. I really like him a lot. We work together on a variety of issues. He did a border tour just a couple weeks ago, and I and Martha McSally both joined him on that border tour in the Arizona portion. He had a piece of legislation to address border security on the interior, particularly the issue of trade and commerce. As you know, in Arizona, we have a really difficult time getting our goods back and forth across the border because of the issue of illegal immigration. Unfortunately, that bill was torpedoed and hasn't come to a vote, even though it's a bipartisan, fairly conservative measure. So I think we've got some real challenges in getting this done. The next big challenge we face is actually this next week, and that's whether or not to continue funding the Department of Homeland Security. And on this one, I agree with Senator Flake that you should have a debate about the political issue of the president's executive action separate and apart from the issue of supporting and funding an agency that's tasked with the internal security of our country. I think we should keep those fights separate from each other.
Do you know the outcome of this one, or
I have no idea.
You're going to predict this one?
You could ask me maybe around 8 p.m. on the 27th. I might have a better idea then. I think it's too hard to predict. Mr. Boehner's going to have to talk to his conference later this week and see what they decide to do.
Okay, for someone with limited intelligence such as I, why can't, I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer.
You're delighted, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm still, never mind. But it seems like a no-brainer. We're talking about the security of the United States.
Well, I think that there's shared agreement across the parties about keeping our country secure and safe, particularly from external threats, but also from domestic terrorism. The challenge is that for members of the Republican conference, they have what they would consider a very legitimate concern about whether or not the president's actions were warranted, and they are looking for a way to voice those concerns. And frankly, Congress has limited ability to influence executive action. So I think they feel this is their only option. I disagree with the strategy. I think you should have those fights separate, but I don't disagree with their concern. You know, I disagree with the way they're handling it, but I think that Congress generally would agree that the function of immigration reform is Congress's function. And while the president took action because Congress has failed to do so, it is fundamentally Congress's job. we should take action on these issues to create permanent solutions.
So I know it's been a short period of time in the new Congress that you're sitting in now. What grade would you give the Congress so far? And I'm not talking about yourself, the Congress as a whole.
I would say a D.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. We've had 6 weeks in Congress where we were there every single week with each other, and not much has gotten done. The reason it's not an F is because of the Clay Hunt Save Act. Because that is an action that I am
Yes.
very proud of. And we came together in a bipartisan way to get that done. But on other issues, we've mostly seen kind of halting activity without really any results. And as you guys know, my slogan is to get stuff done. And I haven't seen this Congress get much stuff done.
A lot of talk, very little action.
One
go
last,
ahead.
we
Go ahead.
have
Yes.
to ask, would you ever be a U.S. Senate candidate?
Oh, you promised not to ask that.
I have to ask you that.
You know,
You don't have to answer, but
I love my job, and as you all know, we had a really pretty tough election in 2014 across the state, and folks in my party didn't fare very well, and I was just honored and pleased to be able to continue serving my constituency.
Be the top performer, I believe.
And I am grateful for that. But that was a lot of hard work of reaching out to folks, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans alike. My goal over the next 2 years is to keep doing that and do that job well.
Kyrsten Sinema, thank you very much for being with us. Continued success in Washington. Good luck to you, especially
Thanks
in
so
this
much.
effort with helping veterans.
Thank you. We'll keep fighting.
Okay?
Thank you for
And we invite you back.
Thanks so much.
The 48th will be right back. Stay with us. I'd like to thank Kyrsten Sinema once again for being our guest today. Also, we'd like to hear from you. If you have any questions, any comments, anything at all regarding the program, please feel
Even
free.
guests that they may want to
Oh,
see.
exactly. Just go ahead and email us. Feel free to email us. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
And join us at the end of this show to watch GCU destroy New Mexico State
Go get 'em,
and
folks.
maintain their winning ways.
Okay. We'll see you again next week. Good night.
The 48th is presented in part by Eastmark, the mark of something special, currently offering over 30 beautiful new quick move-in homes.